mean, this is just common knowledge. This is not hidden. You know, they have no reason to hide it anymore. You know, and then. Thank you for joining me on Unrefined Podcast. I am Brandon Spain, along with Lindsy Waters and BT Wallace, and this is where we explore the mysteries of the universe, uncover new perspectives, and discuss the seen and unseen through a lens of biblical truth. For more content and exclusive resources, visit us at Unrefined Podcast. Now, let's begin this week's journey. Hey, you guys. We are back for another episode of Mojave Mysteries, and interestingly enough, this week we're not really in the Mojave, but we're close to the Mojave. We're in the Black Rock, and we're going to talk about a really interesting topic that I haven't heard a lot of podcasters or anybody really hone in on, and we're going to try to tie it to some different connections and stuff like that. And we're going to speculate a little bit, but we're going to try to stay with just the evidence and stuff. But we're going to talk about Burning Man and Black Rock and the whole culture that's been created around this event. I mean, it's an amazing event. And you know what's so crazy to me about this event is it's something I would go to is what's crazy. But I am the dude that, like all kinds of weird bands in high school and stuff. Let's just start with an overview, a basic overview of what Burning Man is, when it started, a little history, any of that kind of stuff. And, the three of us are going to be talking, but we're going to have a conversation about this. All right. So who wants to go? BT?
Yeah, you got it. So we'd been looking at and discussing Burning Man for a while, and I've kind of been watching this one. I mean, every Labor Day it kind of kicks off, and it's on, IG and everywhere else, little videos. But it's advertised as basically this festival and an art festival, but the way I view it is I don't view Burning Man as merely an art festival that takes place in the Nevada desert. To me, it's more like a modern day mystery school, an alchemical crucible where human creativity, chaos, and transformation all collide in this storm. And I guess we would say at the heart of all of this is this towering effigy that at the end of the celebration is consumed by fire. And that itself is a ritual as old as time.
Is this sympathetic magic, BT? I mean, or can you define that for me? Maybe I'm getting it wrong.
Define sympathetic magic?
Yeah, and is this an example of that?
Give me a second to think about that one.
I'm sorry I sprung that on you.
Well, sympathetic magic itself is coached in terms of like attracts like. That itself that's an old concept, right? Birds of a feather flock together, things like this. And the idea that the effigy burning as some kind of magical artifact, I guess it's an artifact, it's created by human hands. So this towering figure is crafted, it's revered. I mean, it's part of the art festival. And then it's consumed by fire. I mean, that's all part of the massive gathering of all these people. Yeah, there's a whole lot going on, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the use of ritual in large festivals and celebrations is a common occurrence. Once again, it's designed for intention. It depends entirely on the intentionality. However, some would look at this celebration as some kind of catharsis. It's really a collective burning of ego. But I think it's deeper than that. And let me explain why. Because the desert itself is this barren, merciless death valley thing that is the backdrop.
Well, it's almost yin-yang.
It's a liminal space. They're using the desert as a liminal space.
It's extremely hot in the day and extremely cold at night, like the whole dualism there.
Yeah, it's the desert. So what's very common in the desert's things like mirages. And so it blurs the lines of reality. And so what do we got? We got for 1 week, we get tens of thousands of people who gather together to create this city. And it's built on radical self-expression and impermanence. And I think some of this, it's like, why the location? Why this ritual? Why this community? Okay, let's start with the effigy. So throughout history, there have been rituals that have been used to summon gods, banish evil, and renew the land. Okay. The wicker man of the Celtic legend was burned to appease the gods of the harvest. The Zoroastrians saw fire as a connection to the divine, and even the phoenix in Greek myth is that immortal symbol of rebirth, and it's consumed by flames to rise again.
Yeah.
So I ask, what is being summoned or destroyed when they burn the man? But there's more. There's the art, right? I mean, these are just a bunch of questions, and I'm sure we'll answer them in this show. And then there's the art. the sprawling installations, they're often interactive. We'll talk about that. And they're more than this, I think they're more than avant-garde expressions of people experiments.
Oh, definitely.
And they typically encode messages. I mean, that's kind of the point. A lot of these people, they design these things to have some kind of hidden meaning, and you have to guess that. And they're all usually archetypes from the collective unconscious. I've been looking at a lot of these Jungian types in other things.
Is this what you mean by they're trying to, the mystery school aspect of it? They're trying to create a mystery for us to find out. Is that what you're talking about?
Right. But there's labyrinths, there's pyramids, there's spirals, and these are each linked to some kind of ancient esoteric tradition. And so the question, are these artists then channeling inspiration, or is it a form of being conduits?
Could be either, definitely. Right. Or both and.
Both and. And then you look at the participants, right? The Burning Man operates on 10 principles, including radical inclusion, decommodification, communal effort, and a lot of these sound utopian. But if we consider this from our standpoint, many secret societies, from the Masons to the Rosicrucians, use similar language to create bonds of loyalty and shared purpose.
Templars, even our military.
There's even the World Economic Forum. They use these too. So as old as the Burning Man celebration is, can we say that this is a testing ground for these new societal blueprint, like a return to some kind of ancient way of living, an experiment in socialism?
One of the 10 principles, I'm sure we'll probably get to that, is anti-commodification. Just this idea that there's no exchange there, there's no buying and selling, and no consumerism there.
Yeah.
So anti-capitalism is a big part of it.
Anti-capitalism, yep. That's a big indicator of Marxism, yep.
And then if we take the background itself, the backdrop, which is just pregnant with all sorts of meaning, to borrow Dr. Judd Burton's line there.
There you go.
We're talking about the Black Rock Desert, and it has its own secrets, right? It's this dry lake bed, a place where water once teemed with life, but it's desolate. The indigenous Paiute myths speak of spirits tied to this land, and they commonly say that they're angered by the human intrusion of this ritual situation.
Yeah, go into that a little bit. I want to hear about that. Go into the Paiutes and that. What are there any indigenous people near the area that have spoken about Burning Man, like modern day groups that have protested it because of that? I'm just curious.
Well, the indigenous, so this belongs historically to the Paiute indigenous peoples of this area. I mean, it's one of many bands or areas that they had wandered before colonialization. And so they're indigenous to this region, and so they have stories and beliefs that offer this lens. Maybe we could look at this Burning Man, right? So the Paiute have stories of water babies, I guess.
What is a water baby?
I know I might be oversimplifying the term, but basically they're spirits or creatures, entities that dwell in lakes.
Like a marine spirit?
Like a sprite, some kind of, a sylph or whatever, there might be. And they were considered to be like protectors of the land or harbingers of misfortune and destruction. And so Black Rock Desert is this prehistoric lake, right? Its existence as a lake goes back to time immemorial. So it's older than their myths and stories are.
Hey, I just I want to interject this. Sorry, BT, to interrupt you, but I just had a connection or a thought. Area 51 was built on an X lake as well. And so what is I wonder what the connection
Well, in the United States, we have a lot of dry lake beds, and this is actually because of a geological formation. A lot of areas are basins in the United States. We have a lot of this.
So it could just be coincidence.
The Arches, right? We have like Arches National Park in Utah, for example. Moab, etc. It was a water bay. There's water flowing through there, carved out like the Grand Canyon would have been carved out. So I mean, this is just ancient waterways, and we all know from an occult perspective what waterways are.
Exactly.
Within the practice, and the fact
portals. I mean, basically
to the underworld. We viewed water as access to the underworld. From a European standpoint, it's not exactly the same for the indigenous peoples, and so we actually have to examine this from a different perspective, and we can't just sit here and go, well, they're on Indian land, and so they're dealing with Indian spirits. Well, they may not view those spirits as Indian. They may view them very well as European. And if we view them as a European, that's a little bit of a different situation. And so we're trying to appease them the way Europeans do. Hence, when I brought up the Wicker Man and the Celtic mythology.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the whole Celtic aspect, people don't realize how pervasive the Celts were across the entire world. I mean, I think they found, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to get this wrong, but possible Celtic influence in the North American and South American continents to give credence to the coastal theory of migration.
There's this idea of Prince Madoc. I know that much. This Welsh guy who supposedly went overseas, over into the Western Hemisphere at some point. So yeah, a lot of early exploration, even some of the Lewis and Clark stuff. There was this idea that we might find the lost Welsh there.
Yeah.
Well, even think about this. Mine and BT's namesake came over here, St. Brendan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, so...
Yeah, and, Lindsay, and if we go back and we consider those principles of the festival, the radical inclusion, the self-reliance, the decomification, what we're talking about is that the Burning Man strips away the layers of modern life, and it creates this vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. And into that void would rush intent, symbols, and a collective will. And that's really at the heart of the sympathetic magic. It's an act. Is it an act of collective healing, as they may say, an attempt to burn away the old and usher in some kind of new? Or are all of these people unwitting victims, I guess you would say, unwitting participants in this larger unseen ritual? And what's interesting, at the end of the festival, this is the kicker, right? At the end of the festival of every year, the festival leaves no trace physically. But we know sympathetic magic doesn't dissipate.
Yeah.
It stays.
Yeah, it stays. Yeah. Remains. So, in other words, like what I'm hearing you say is that this could be a ritual that has been passed down for thousands of years, and these guys don't even really know that they're participating in some form of sympathetic magic from thousands of years ago.
Well, I think the location is different. The ritual is the same.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's where it's at. The location, I mean, sure, the Wicker Man's done in, old Ireland. And
is that a Nordic practice too? Is that a Scandinavian?
Men,
Yeah.
The burning of effigies.
Yeah.
I do know it's really popular on Guy Fawkes Day. I can tell you that much.
Oh, yeah. We know why it's popular. That's one of my favorite British holidays.
But the use of burning some kind of effigy is old. You know what? If somebody were to do a Google search, they're going to find it in every culture throughout time, all the way back to the dawn of man. The use of burning something to do.
Is this
something.
why a lot of Christians have problems with cremation? Is because of the perhaps pagan foundation of it? I mean, I'm not.
I think they have
like
a problem. I think they have a problem with cremation because generally what ends up happening is someone's like, "Oh, I want a vial of their ashes or whatever," and it's like what they're doing then is they're separating component parts of the remains of a person for superstitious reasons, right? Like, I always want this person to be near me.
That makes sense.
It's an unhealthy superstition.
Well, does the Catholic Church have a doctrine about that? Are they against or pro, or is it kind of?
Yeah, the Roman Church has been having to battle with this one, and due to the fact that there's actually an honest look at space and the availability of burying the dead, their whole bodies, and when we're talking, billions of people, and then we're talking about limited space over time. You're gonna run out of space to use a 3 feet by 6 feet hole, and then they have to be spaced so many feet apart, and so on and so forth. I mean, through history we do have mass graves. I mean, that was kind of a thing once upon a time, but in modern Western culture, we bury the dead completely in a graveyard. But the Catholic Church has had to battle with this because you have the cremation of remains, and once again, that idea that some people would go, they're going to keep grandma on the mantle or something like that, and that's where she's at in the vase for mom and dad then pass away, and now you have grandma's vase, and now you have mom and dad's vase on the mantle, and very soon you just have a mantle of dead. And sure, that sounds kind of gruesome, but the thing is they belong on the ground.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I've always wanted to be cremated, but even if I am cremated, I want to be buried. I mean, I think it goes with the whole theology of us coming from the earth, we go back to the earth type of.
Correct. And so basically the church has ruled you may be cremated, but you have to be buried in the ground, and you cannot have your ashes divided. And that's like, obviously sounds great because we don't want to cause any incursions of possible superstition to be associated with the remnants.
Well, Presbyterians, Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong. We've talked about this. I think they're the same way, except they don't even allow cremation at all. It's kind of some Presbyterians are against cremation, and I've never figured out why.
Yeah, I
Well,
don't
your
think I've
body
ever
will
talked
eventually be
about
that.
cremation with Presbyterian before. It makes sense that they'd be against that to me, but yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, back to topic. We chased a rabbit there, but I think it's important to our discussion because we're talking about ancient rituals and things, and I want to bring into the fact that we see in the movies, we see in myths, we see in literature, we see that the pagans burned their people, whereas the Christians buried their people, which is not entirely accurate because I think a lot of Native Americans obviously buried their people too. So, but
Yeah, there's a
yeah.
variety of ritual associated with
Yeah.
it. Yeah. There are cremations. Some indigenous do cremate.
Yeah.
Some indigenous do the system where they actually put their dead on pyres way up in
Yeah,
the sky.
big scaffolds, and
Yep.
I mean, obviously the buzzards get to them eventually, I would imagine. But yeah, it's those big platforms.
What else, like kind of foundational BT do you want to throw out here that's important for our ongoing discussion with this?
Yeah, my biggest thing was the fact that it's just observationally, like I said, at the end of the year during the festival, there's going to be Instagram posts of the different things that are built, and they're amazing what they're capable of doing with small generators, either solar or otherwise, and being able to just make lights and do pretty things and make it look like Christmas, if you will. And there's something to be said about human ingenuity to be able to take literally nothing in the desert and make something at least temporary is an amazing feat of humanity. But
Yeah.
the end of the day, the intention for many of the goers may be to celebrate a form of life that is a little bit more utopic. I mean, that's the desire and the dream. What ends up happening, there was rat experiments done about this. When rats are exposed to a utopic environment, they literally lose any motivation to do anything. They have all their food they want available, all they can do, everything they can have, dream, imagine, it's there for them to have. They just become stagnant, lazy, and they don't do anything. And so utopic visions turn into dystopic realities pretty fast. And while Burning Man may promote this utopic agenda, it's not something I would want to strive for. And it seems to be the reason it only lasts a week is because, well, it isn't a self-sustaining agenda.
Well, I read something somewhere that there's a political motivation with this, and we'll get into that more that they're trying to strive to make mobile cities. I've heard of that's like some kind of an experiment.
Nomadic.
Makes sense. Yeah, it might tie in with this old idea of autonomous zones. I mean, we saw a particular one during the so-called Summer of Love in Seattle, the Chaz, whatever they called it.
Yeah,
Right.
Chaz.
This idea of creating spaces that aren't under any governments except the madmen who run them.
That's what
Yeah. But anyway, so that may tie into it as well.
Well, let me ask y'all a question. What y'all think about this? And if this is out of line, just tell me. What if we think about like what we talk about oftentimes on the show, like the whole Genesis 8, the whole Nephilim agenda, the whole Watcher agenda? Wouldn't this ritual or this event just really be an expression of the gifts, the Promethean gifts that the Watchers gave to humanity? Could that? I mean, I don't want to stretch this. I don't want to speculate, and it could even be unintentional. It could be more spiritual or whatever. But I see that tie for the the esoteric knowledge that the Watchers brought down to humanity, and this commemorates that almost every year.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if that's a stretch, it ain't much of one, because it's just hard not to see that. We see it everywhere because it probably is everywhere.
Great point.
That was a foundation, and yeah, I don't want to excuse like crazy pareidolia, but yeah, it's hard not to see this stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
The Watcher story is so foundational to our story, and you see something like this essentially not much different than the whole Bohemian cremation of care done every year. In the desert, except a lot more public and a lot bigger and a lot less hidden.
I'll get into that in a minute. It could be a recruiting zone, but I'll talk more about that when I get into my part. But yeah, I mean, it's not just for elites, even though elites are definitely there.
Yeah, when we talk about, was it Genesis 6? Nephilim, we're talking about Genesis 6 as opposed to Deuteronomy 32, which is the nations are divided up.
I don't know why I always do that.
the-
I say Genesis 8. I don't know where I get Genesis 8 from. Anyway.
It's all right. It happens. I mean, you've got the Nephilim, right? And they're those mysterious half-human, half-divine beings. Giants, gigantus is what the Septuagint renders them as. This is the thing with conspiracy theories, right? So, I mean, this is basically kind of, this is a speculation. This is, conspiracy theory. This is a speculation. And so some of us who look at the Nephilim agenda would say that the Nephilim never disappeared.
Yes.
And so that they adapted. And if you notice how the Burning Man feels, well, for some, they say that the Burning Man feels like like they're drawn to it.
Mm-hmm.
In like this primal sense. Of course,
interesting word choice.
There's a couple of other, like, certain people are drawn to it that are a little bit more, I'm going to use the word liberal, and I don't mean it disrespectfully.
Yeah.
They're a little bit more liberal with their mindset and mind space and religious space than conservative, which means they're not really free. A conservative mind space person has freedom. A liberal mind space person is a slave to whatever primal force draws them. And this is one of those forces. That means that it's going to be more than a party. It's going to be a beacon. I remember reading the Bible where the prophets of Baal cut themselves up, and then that's what drew whatever energies that were after that. But now you have all these people running around in the desert with lights, and if anybody's gone camping, they know that a lantern's going to draw moths and flies and other bugs to the flame. There are entities out there that are drawn to human ingenuity and human creativity.
Yeah. Spiritual pheromones, what I call them.
And light.
And they're drawn even to the idea whether an actual human being is sacrificed or not, I would imagine, to burning and blood sacrifice. And, you've got this thing shaped like a human being being burned there.
Well, how big is this effigy, too?
Yeah.
It's a giant.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yep. I know. I'm hitting. Everything's a nail right now. But I mean, I just think that's just not a coincidence that they're burning this big 9-10 foot or bigger effigy. So, and the fact that it is a Celtic ritual, and the fact that the Celts are descended from the Galatians, and I don't want to go too deep into all that because I'm not knowledgeable about all that. I don't want to speculate, but I've heard rumors that the Galatians were descendants of the Nephilim, possibly. Is that true? We don't know.
Anything's a nail, like you said. I mean, you can say that all day long.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. Nope.
I mean, the reality of the situation is you look at what's going on, the fact that it's a free love space. Mm-hmm. Where anything goes, mostly anything, but pretty much anything goes.
Except for there's another.
The first Burning Man happened at Baker Beach in San Francisco on the summer solstice. Right. They didn't pick that day by accident, and they were hippie, and apparently there was a big there were already sort of hippie solstice celebrations, but still. They burned an effigy on the summer solstice,
and that was 70s.
That was 86.
86.
Yeah, it was like 17 or 18. It was real small crowd. I remember reading about that, and
it's just he didn't just pick that date, and some people say Larry Harvey, the guy that started it, some of it was a bad breakup, and it was this cathartic burning. The man was actually a woman, and it was sort of this cathartic burning her or something like that. But
sure.
Okay.
That's those people who look at art. They look at a banana duct taped to the wall and go, man, I'm going to spend $3 million on that. Those are the same kind of people. They're just like, I'm going to poke a hole in this bucket of sand and watch it topple 10 buckets on top of it and call it art.
Yeah.
Well, to me, it's the epitome of consumerism, but yet we're against consumerism. It's that,
nothing is consumed faster than in fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I also think too, we need to, this is just the obvious that we need to bring out too, is the contrast with the mainstream society, how they are trying to contrast their their unit, their group, their culture. I mean, they have a culture, you guys, and for their however many days it is, they have a culture, and it's definitely juxtaposed next to the mainstream culture.
Juxtaposition is probably the best terminology to use for Burning Man, because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Well, and like you said earlier, they have this interest in spiritual freedom and exploring different things, but in reality, it's not freedom. And we know from our studies with the esoteric things and the sinister forces that they don't bring freedom. They bring they entice you with freedom, and then they bring bondage. But there's a lot of good things about this thing. Is it kind of harkens back to Babel in a way to me too. A bunch of people getting together and uniting together and trying to have one focus, one goal. And it definitely helps Nevada. I know that. It helps their economy.
Yeah.
You have 30,000.
Vegas and Reno can't carry that burden all the time.
Yeah.
Well, we also look at the idea, this freedom of religion thing that is kind of touted. Well, it's freedom of any religion except for Christianity.
Yes.
Or Islam. I mean, it's just, you can't, look, I'm so punk, I'll never tell a person what to do with their life, but I will strongly advise, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to encourage somebody.
Amen.
And so it's like, I'm all right with just being disenfranchised with politic in general and being anti-establishment and being punk, but I'm not going to tell somebody that they can't have an organized religion in an area, because then I wouldn't be free to speak freedom of religion. I would be saying, you may practice any religion except for this one, and that's not freedom. That's, once again, liberal. Liberalism doesn't offer true freedoms. It offers the illusion.
Yeah, I'd love to see a court case where somebody makes the point that secularism is actually a religion and we need freedom from religion. I don't know how that would work, but you could make a good case,
Well, any philosophical movement with any kind of established roots in anything really can devolve into a religion, but not simply philosophy, but science itself can devolve into a religion of its.
Yep.
It's like trust the science. Well, not trusting the science is exactly how science is done, and that's for any scientist out there. You don't trust 100% the science because you retest everything. That's the whole point of the methodology of the madness, right? You going, hey, this is going to work 100% of the time. Then you find out that it doesn't work 5% of the time or something goofy like that when you test it. And this is no different. Burning Man is a science experiment.
Yeah, that's great. I like that. It is. It's a big science experiment with scientism being the operative religion.
Liberal scientism.
So, Waters, give us some connections here, man. I know there's got to be some Hollywood or some celebrity or some interesting connections to all the stuff we've been talking about.
Yeah, there were a few. Obviously, it started on I already said one of it. I thought it was interesting. This started, this very sort of pagan Celtic looking thing started on the summer solstice of 86.
Yeah, that's cool.
The thing that kind of brought it out to the desert was in 1990, the San Francisco authority said, no, you can't burn the man this year. So they put it in storage. And meanwhile, a group called the Cacophony Society.
Yeah, Cacophony. Yeah.
Particularly a guy named John Law and another guy named Michael Mickle were already having their own little sort of hippie. The Cacophony Society was it morphed out of an earlier society called the Suicide Society or the Suicide Club.
Interesting.
And they were this kind of leftist, situationist, sort of Dadaist, those old lefty art guys who tried to sort of turn art on its head and critique capitalism through like pranksterism and fake ads and things like that.
Yeah. What's the name?
The Merry Pranksters were
Yeah.
The Merry Pranksters were a similar kind of group. They were having their own little event out in Black Rock. They were calling it Bad Day at Black Rock after the old Spencer Tracy movie, just because I guess they thought that was a cool title. They had heard that, they had been to some of the early Baker Beach Burning Man ceremonies, some of them. So they had heard that had been shut down. So like, well, bring your effigy out here. And it sort of merged these two communities together and created what we now call Burning Man. And the Cacophony Society is just, the whole idea is social critique of particularly capitalism. Michael Mickle was an early Silicon Valley guy. I thought that was an interesting connection.
So what year is this? What year is this, Lindsay? 90s?
Yeah, this is the early 90s, but he was a Vietnam vet, combat vet.
Yeah.
And made his way to Silicon Valley in the 70s. And it's funny, a lot of those early Silicon Valley guys were countercultural. Steve
Definitely.
Jobs was, I think even Bill Gates was to a degree. Yeah. They were all hippies. A lot of our technology was built by the counterculture, and knowing what we know about the counterculture.
We'll get into that.
But yeah. So Mike McKell was a Silicon Valley guy, and he was one of the big guys who organized, him and a guy named John Law. I also just think it's interesting, this sort of, okay, so anti-commodification, but you got to pay for a ticket, and it costs thousands of dollars to go to this thing every year. I mean, the ticket plus all these other things, sometimes you got to pay for that whole leave no trace thing.
Yeah.
And, that's another kind of, maybe that's one of those juxtapositions you were talking about, BT. You can have your communism, but you got to pay to get in the door.
Right.
That's a real line right there. You can have your commie, but you got to pay for it.
Yeah. There seems like every one of their, or at least a lot of their 10 principles get, kind of contradicted by some other aspect of the way they do things. Civic responsibility. Well, that many people gathered in the desert is going to tear things up and leave a trace any way you look at it. Radical inclusion, but you got to pay to get in. That doesn't sound like radical inclusion to me.
It's a form of gentrification. Think about it.
Yeah.
You move into the poor neighborhood and you make it so big and more expensive, and then the poor people can't live there anymore. And that's exactly what's happened to Burning Man. I mean, it's supposed to be for the people, but only the people that can afford $1,000 tickets.
Yeah. I mean, some homeless New Age crystal guy probably would love to go there, but couldn't dare afford it if he sold every one of his crystals. So yeah, it's just, you see all this very sort of leftist elitism just burning as bright as that burning effigy in this again and again. I always thought it was interesting, the Portland chapter of the Cacophony Society, because it's spread out. One of the members is, I got to look him up again because I can never say his name right. The guy who wrote Fight Club, not the guy who directed the movie, but the guy who Chuck. Hold on, I'm going to find out here.
Palahniuk.
Yeah. It's a weird, very Slavic sounding name, but yeah, he is a Cacophony Society member, and that makes a lot of sense when you think about things like Burning Man and this sort of radical critique of everything, this idea of breaking everything down. I mean, think about the main character in that book is trying to sow so much chaos that society collapses, and you just see that a lot on the left, and even on
smiley face at the end.
The actual far right, the extreme sort of what Bill Ramsey calls what is the term he uses for them? Accelerationists.
Accelerationists, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna speed up the collapse of society and
order 9 angles type, but even further right than them probably.
And that's exactly the kind of character you see in Fight Club. He's trying to destroy. The Fight Clubs are just part of his plan to break down society, and groups like the Cacophony Society being involved in this, makes it suspect. What's their greater agenda in this whole Burning Man thing? What sort of alternate community are they trying to show to break down society and create order out of chaos? Or, some people in that crowd, it's not even about making order out of chaos. It's just about the chaos. It's watching the world burn,
Yeah, for entertainment, like Nero. Watch Rome burn.
Yeah. So yeah, that was some of the connections I got out of it.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's do a Diddy list here real quick, okay? But we're going to do it for Burning Man. So who would be on? Like, I know in your research you probably encountered certain stars or celebrities, people we might know that participated in or do participate in this. Do you know of anybody offhand, Lindsay?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of them. I can't think of anybody offhand.
Yeah, I'm just trying to tie it back to Laurel Canyon and back to the Hollywood sort of, which it is, obviously, because that's where the elites live out there.
Well, how about the fact that the name of the dry lake bed, Black Rock?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just throw that name around for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. That was not lost on me at all, but I didn't know if I was doing pareidolia to bring that up. But yeah, BlackRock, who controls our country, basically. I mean, theoretically. If not control, they definitely have their hands in a lot of cookie jars.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the name connection there.
Well, here we go. Okay, we were talking about the Cacophony Society, and I was trying to remember. I was trying to remember when it was, and I think it was in the early 2000s, or even just 2000 itself. I can't remember. The members of that group, the Cacophony Society, had staged a burn just outside of Area 51.
Oh, wow.
For
So,
real?
for
Wow.
real.
Yeah, did not know that.
That's crazy. I mean, wow. That actually leads into, I guess, to some of my stuff. I want to tie in to basically the foundational, before I tie into the cultural experiments and the government aspects and all this. I want to bring this back to the fact of we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and thrones, and so we have to understand that people we wrestle with are attempting to establish their own culture, their own world, their own new world order. So when I start talking about the government and the CIA and all that kind of stuff, it's not just a people thing. It's a sinister force thing that we have to be aware of. I'm not shirking from responsibility for these people. I mean, they have a choice. However, this just ties into all the sinister forces. And, going back to, we've talked about it before with Laurel Canyon, and we talked about some of the Mojave Mysteries. I mean, there is an intense amount of ley lines in that whole area of Nevada, California, Arizona, that whole area. That's what we've been, talking about, the Mojave Mysteries, and we delved out of Mojave, but it's still in the same area anyway. So just to do a few basic things, the first thing that I noticed when I watched some research videos is that the setup of the city itself is an occultic symbol, which BT alluded to a little earlier, but it's a half circle. We've talked about the Wicker Man and the Celtic origin, and then the Babylonian origin, and all that kind of stuff. We've touched on just elite participation of and new order, links, like it's been called the playground of the elite. I've heard that, and even in the news, I mean, the mainstream media, it's been called the playground. And and I think it's another example, and I think the government does this all over the place, another example of trying to create a counterculture just to see how they can create movements and how they can control culture. Which reminds me of, there's a fiction book that I know Lindsay and I both read. It's a Christian fiction book, but it's talking about different movements of the church, and how the church needs to get back to being a movement as well, because these other movements, these countercultural movements, they're started by sinister forces and dark people, so to speak, are trying to do the job the church should be doing. It's almost like a counterfeit. We always see that the occultists counterfeit the biblical way of doing things, what we see in the church and all that. And so they're doing that with creating culture and movements and stuff like that. And so it's not lost on me that the CIA is ultimately still experimenting. I mean, even with MKUltra, I saw some in the videos. There's programming going on out there, and they basically have created a little self-sustained culture that has its own government. It has its own temple. Did y'all know how it had temple there? I mean, that's crazy, y'all. As a temple, it has all these. It's just a mini culture, a mini utopia, like we said earlier. And we know the word utopia. We when we hear that, we know what they're going for. They're going for false peace. It's the pieces the world gives, not as pieces heaven gives. And so it's just a huge social engineering testing ground. And people were sheep. I mean, Sandy and I were watching a movie last night, and it was set in Ireland, and they had these fences around like this cliff to keep the sheep from going. And she's like, "They'll just walk off the cliff." I said, "Sandy, there's a reason why God calls us sheep." Yeah, they'll walk off the cliff. Absolutely.
We're about as sharp as a beach ball.
Exactly. It was sharp as a beach ball. That's a good expression. I like that. But, and then you have the whole MKUltra stuff, and that comes with the psychedelics, because I know a lot of the guys that are pro psychedelic. I'm not going to name them here on the podcast, but guys I read that I've in the entrepreneurial circles, they're dabbling with microdosing and all that. And that's another topic for another day, another discussion, another debate. But they're using it for, I would say, more sinister forces. They're not trying to get rid of depression or anxiety only. I mean, they're trying to connect spiritually with beings. And these psychedelics, I mean, that's what MKUltra is made of, right?
Yeah. Let's take a moment, step back, because we were talking about counterculture and countercultural movements, right?
Yeah. Yep.
These countercultural movements are usually started by humans for a certain aim, okay? One of the big ones, Laurel Canyon was a test bed for a countercultural experiment, the hippie movement, etc. Well, these are all man-made countercultural movements. If you go back to scripture, if you go back and you read the Bible, if you go back and you look at the stories, who'd they pull out of society to restart society? Noah and his family. They pulled Noah and his family aside to say, hey, we're starting a countercultural movement with you. It goes forward.
Boom.
Moses, we need you to grab them Hebrews, bring them back. They're my people. Bring the Israel. They're my people. We're going to start a countercultural society where you guys don't do these things that all the cultures around you do. You're now a countercultural movement. Christianity today, if it's an honest Christianity, is going to be a countercultural movement.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. On that same note, I mean, we should be the counterculture. Yes, and we should be that city in the desert too. I mean,
Yes.
we the thing that
doesn't go away at the end of the week.
Yeah.
Well,
the thing that they're mocking should be us.
Well, we're at a place. I mean, let's be honest, you guys. We are outliers now. Christianity. I mean, I know there's the existing institutions that are still there, but real Christians that follow Jesus, we're in a place of liminality. We really are. In every group and every denomination, you have the reals and the fakes, and we're at a place of liminality in our culture. Not just the United States, but even post-Christian culture of Europe.
Yeah, we're called to be a liminal space. I don't know if anybody
exactly
picked up on that.
Yes, BT, exactly. You nailed it. We are supposed to be like that. It was never intended. And I'm gonna pick on Constantine a little bit, but he created us into the religion of the empire when we should have stayed countercultural in a lot of ways.
Yeah, making it legal was one thing. Making it vogue was the problem.
Yes, definitely. And I'm not one of those restorationist guys, that thinks, the church died after Constantine. I'm not going there. But we can't ignore the aspect of how he took us in from the liminal and put us in his pen, So, but
yeah, I tell people to be mindful of how the guy died. He died a baptized Arian. So he did, on his deathbed, Eusebius of Nicomedia or something like that baptized him on his deathbed.
How did he
baptize? Dude was an Arian priest. If the guy's willing to go his entire life without actually picking a side, he's not exactly the person I'm going to say he started this thing.
He would have taken either side, any side that won out in the whole Nicaea thing. Yes. He would have gone with. It was clear.
Yeah. But anyway, back to the liminality, back to the outlier thing. I mean, and here we are in our culture today. We've been used to in Christendom, which I still believe this. Me and my brother-in-law talk about this all the time about how Christians should be shaping culture. But instead, the sinister forces are shaping culture by creating their liminal cultures. And let's face it, all of us, when we were kids, man, we didn't want to be a part of that. We wanted to be on Rebel Without a Cause. I did. I mean, I listened to punk music and heavy metal, and I skateboarded. I didn't want to be a part of that. And the interesting thing about that, though, particularly in high school, is those kind of people were actually the cool ones. The ones that went with the Joneses weren't.
Yeah, we look at a lot of cultural movements. You're right. They should be, oddly enough, started by Christians for the environment. Because, I mean, like I said, Christianity actually offers true freedom.
Yes.
As opposed to liberalness, which is anti-freedom.
It's bondage. Yep.
Right. It is a bondage to something, and it's not of God. Well, you could say, okay, look, countercultural movements in the 1930s, one of the biggest ones was prophylactics. Birth control was a real big one, and abortion was kind of kicking off. I mean, the whole Nazi thing was kind of moving along anyways across the world, and this idea of selective breeding. And so eugenics, basically.
Yeah.
And you look at that, and Christians were united against prophylactics all the way up until the mid-1930s. And then all of a sudden something changed within the non-Catholic community specifically, because that's actually where it changed. And it began somewhere in some non-denominational church. And it moved from there into the rest of a lot of Christian circles where prophylactics are okay. It's okay to have birth control because, after all, medicine can control when you can have a child. Let's put another man in place of your relationship with God and your husband or whatever. And it's just this ridiculous thing.
And one of the big things Sandy and I struggled with when we went through it before we had kids is I don't think people realize that after so many years, and this is controversial, and I'm not judging anyone or anybody out there, but after so many years of being on birth control, you have an abortion, if not several. And people, I mean, like the picture of the baby that came out with what is it called? The IUD? Is that what it's called? In its hand.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Nice try.
Fast
Oh my
one.
gosh, that's so funny. Anyway, oh man. All right, well, moving on. We'll talk about more of the government military involvement. Because that's one step down from the sinister forces and stuff. And there's been numerous allegations out there. I did a real kind of deep dive on this of DARPA, NSA, and surveillance movements in the actual thing, and it's so chaotic. It's easy just to put it in there. And what's so crazy is a lot of the people are either so stoned or high or so euphoric that they don't even think that this is worth the government spying on, when they have to keep track of their movement that they're starting here. Now, I don't have any obviously concrete proof that this is a CIA agenda. It's just evidence. Like I always say, there's evidence, no proof, but the evidence begins to add up. And, and you start to see similar patterns and similar things over and over. And you begin to think, well, that's not just a natural life pattern. That's a human involvement pattern. Like, like how they say about archaeology, you see a straight line in Google Earth. When we interviewed our archaeologist friend, you see a straight line or you see these patterns. That's not normally nature. That's humanity involved. And so when you begin to see these patterns in this, you begin to think, well, there's some outside force that's involved that's surveying what's going on. And so have DARPA, NSA, chaos theory type stuff. They're just experimenting with what is chaos theory. Do we have a natural tendency to want to bring order out of chaos? And like you said, BT, sometimes we don't. I think sometimes people just revel in the chaos, Dionysian type behaviors in there, which, harkens me back to one of my favorite bands in high school, Jim Morrison and the Doors, and his whole, attitude, and Nietzsche and the chaos and that whole beyond good and evil. I think Nietzsche talks a lot about the two the more stoic oriented and then the more Dionysian oriented type people in the world. So anyway, but this whole thing is just an experiment in psychology, and supposedly there's advanced crowd control type things using frequencies. That's a conspiracy. Now I'm speculating, but that's out there that they use that kind of stuff, which we do know they use that
blue light.
Area 51 and different places like that. So that is, you can get on YouTube and Google frequency weapons. But to use frequencies, they're learning how to use frequencies, like the whole story that I've told actually on here one time about the man that was realizing that these people were seeing apparitions, and he figured out what frequency is. He fixed the air conditioner and they quit seeing it well. And then he went to a pub and he figured out, the government knows these frequencies and they can create hallucinogenic and, hallucinations with frequency. And so they're experimenting with supposedly with stuff like that. I mean, they have a big petri dish out in the desert. Imagine that. Who wouldn't jump on that? If I was a government leader, I can experiment with all these very willing people who think this is like, a big Grateful Dead widespread panic following, that kind of thing, which it reminds me of, which is another cultural experiment. But there's also alien and interdimensional connections, tons of UFO sightings and portals, believe it or not. A lot of the people believe that when they burn the effigy at the end, that it opens a portal to other dimensions and stuff. I mean, this is just common knowledge. This is not hidden. They have no reason to hide it anymore. And then going back to the Dionysian thing too, I think they're experimenting. How can we control these people with bread and circuses? How can we keep them in chaos and decadence and all this kind of stuff? And I think that comes from Hollywood. I think that's a lot of Hollywood. Let's entertain them to death. But there was a book out there that basically dealt with entertaining ourselves to death. And it goes back to what BT was talking about, that you get everything around you that you possibly need and you don't have to work for it. You lose your purpose of life. I mean, God in Genesis, he didn't say, hey, work is a punishment. He said hard work, difficult work was part of the curse, not work. We were intended to work, and we were intended to be conquerors, and we were intended to take over the world and conquer the world, and we miss that. And then we get weird eschatological teachings where we put our heads in the sand and we miss out on the whole aspect of we need to be conquering the world. We need to be creating culture that goes against the culture that's prevalent, just like in the Middle Ages. Whether you like Middle Age Catholic theology, blah blah blah, it doesn't matter. The Catholic Church created culture in that time period, and it was good. It pulled us out of the Dark Ages. And so the church is intended to do that. We're intended to create culture, new heaven and new earth. So anyway, y'all have anything you want to add to that about any kind of occult stuff that y'all saw? Or
no, I saw pretty much the same thing about the UFO sightings and the portals.
Yeah. Well, and then the penultimate is the Phoenix Rising. I mean, we could take another 30 minutes, which we're not, but we could take another 30 minutes to just talk about that whole aspect of the Phoenix Rising, the counterfeit resurrection. And that's their metaphor of what they want to do with our culture. That's the New World Order, is to burn down chaos and to rebuild order
in their image.
In their image. I think
instead of the image of the Lord, in the sinister forces image. Honestly, I mean, that's we as people think we're so autonomous and so powerful, and we're in a lot of ways we're just pawns. The Christians are the ones that are powerful, and we have the living God living inside of us. I mean, that in itself is just mind blowing. They're just the Johns and Jambres, the two Egyptian magicians that could do some stuff, basically. But not. Yeah, I mean, parlor tricks. We have the God of the universe that lives inside our little frail mortal bodies.
That's right.
Yeah. So anyway, just even studying all this stuff, to me, you guys, and I want it to inspire our audience as well. It inspires me to want to do what I can do to change the world, not for my sakes, but for the sake of the gospel, to permeate the gospel, to start a movement of the gospel. And I think it's coming. I think that's part of God's end time schemes. He's definitely going to unite the church, and we're going to do what we're supposed to be doing. And he's going to do it. He's going to do it. Yep.
I think it's great that we can spend some time researching the Burning Man and looking at kind of these ideas and these agendas. But, I felt that what I felt that seemed to be the truest after looking at videos and watching Instagrams and just watching things about this is it's like man's heart is a furnace and it's yearning for fire. And I think deep within everybody is this burning desire, not merely for pleasure and power, but for meaning, purpose. I mean, even for, dare I say, transcendence.
Yeah.
The soul longs to connect with something greater, something eternal, but it knows that the things of this world are not enough. So what happens? We search. We look for ways to satisfy it. And, looking at Burning Man, this is vast effigy in the middle of a desert. Thousands are gathering. They build a city of impermanence. They set the thing ablaze, and they revel in the glow of its destruction. And it is, I was questioning this spiritually. I was kind of questioning this in my heart. Was this fire more than just a mere spectacle? It seemed to be more like a cry to the heavens. They're asking, why am I here? Who am I? And what is my purpose? And this is what's really interesting, is that the ritual, as moving as it might seem, is incomplete. When the fire dies and the ashes scatter to the winds, what remains? The effigy's gone, the questions persist. And so man leaves that desert unchanged, for he sought the meaning in the flames of his own creation, not in the eternal flame of the Creator. And it reminds me of the story of Moses and the burning bush, right? I mean, there too was a fire of a bush, but the bush wasn't consumed. It burned with an eternal fire, because it symbolized the divine love of God, which does not destroy but purifies and gives life. And I think there's a big difference. And so the fire of Burning Man consumes, leaving nothing but ash. The fire of Christ burns within the heart and transforms it into something new.
Yes.
I can give the quote, but I can't give the address. Where Jesus says, I have come to cast fire upon the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. And I really think that's the fire people are seeking. And so if I was to leave the listeners with a question, I would leave them with the question of, what fire burns in your heart? Yeah. Is it a fire you light yourself, destined to die out when the wood runs dry? Or is it the eternal flame of Christ, the fire of divine love that will never go out? And so the ashes of your idols will be swept away, and you will find what you were made for, not the fleeting warmth of this world, but the eternal embrace of God.
Oh, man, that's rich. It's true. I mean, without the Spirit, all we are is dust in the wind.
That's right.
Well, thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Mojave Mysteries. And this was a little outside the Mojave for you haters again. I know I'm going to hear it. But it still is in the same neighborhood. How about that? Yeah. So thank you guys for listening. And we love you. And we'll be with you again real soon. Thanks for listening and supporting us. And remember, stay naturally supernatural.